had all these fears where like fear is really demonized in the birth world. Like fear causes complications and interventions and like causes your birth to go awry, or like it means you're just not trusting enough. And for me, like the fear was just so holy. Like it was the invitation from God to lay it all down and let him in. Like I would have had no reason to surrender to him without the fear.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share home birth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year, from the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall, of Rooted in Eden Private Membership Association,
And me, holistic birth keeper and photographer Brooke Collier of Sister Birth. Together, we are co-founders and facilitators of Hearth Mother Journey, where we are raising up the next generation of holy wild birth keepers.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all of your decisions unto the Lord and reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has called good.
Please remember that birth is not a medical event, but a natural process, and we are not your care providers, so this should not be taken as medical advice. All right. Hello, Holy Wild Birth listeners. Welcome to another episode. We have a birth story for you today that is also a rebirth story, which you'll see what I mean by that shortly. But I'm in the studio with Gemma. And hi, Gemma.
Hi. It's great to be
How are you
here.
today?
Good. Yeah, it's a quiet morning with baby on my chest, and there's nothing I'd rather do than talk about birth.
Yes. Yeah, Gemma's in the dark, you guys. This is her level of devotion as she got up before it was even light out to talk with us. So I'm so delighted and eager to jump in. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Anything you want us to know about you. It doesn't just have to be birth related, but about your family and where you live and things you're passionate about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm a birth worker, which plays a lot into my story and this story. I have 3 little ones. We're going to be talking about the birth of the most recent babe, but my first 2 were home births as well. I became a birth worker after the birth of my oldest, who's almost 9 now, and worked in and out of the system. But over the last few years, I've predominantly been working in home birth and unassisted birth and traditional midwifery. So that's the lens that I come from. We live in a little cabin in the woods in the Rocky Mountains, and we're homesteaders and homeschoolers and all the good things.
Yes, you are our kind of people. So we love it. All right. So you were sharing that this story, which is the one we're focusing on, kind of has an origin point a little bit before you even conceived this baby. So let's start there.
Yeah, when my second was about 1, we were blessed with another pregnancy, and it was around 12 weeks when I just intuitively knew something was wrong. Looking back now, like I can feel that was the Holy Spirit. I've always had wild pregnancies, but at that point I was like, I want to go in and get an ultrasound because I just knew. So I went in and got an ultrasound and found twins, but that they had already passed, which was, I mean, such a beautiful, tender, bittersweet moment. And then I went through their birth at home, which was really healing because prior to my second, I had had a loss as well and kind of had the same thing. I'd gone to the hospital to see if it was a loss and ended up having the whole process there. And it was really traumatic just in the way I was treated. And it was my first hospital birth. It was not fun. And so it was a really redemptive experience having that birth at home. Like, even though it was so wrapped in grief, it was also really holy and really powerful. yeah, I'd hemorrhaged after both losses. One of them being in the hospital. It was very, very dramatic and scary. And then it happened again here. And yeah, it really brought me to my knees in trusting and surrendering. And we were so wrapped in safety and we were all well eventually. But yeah, that was kind of the beginning of my story because I was pregnant again 2 weeks later.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was kind of the landscape of where I was when I learned of this baby in my womb. So there was fear for sure in receiving a baby so soon after loss. And there was also just like this immense joy and peace since like the moment he entered my womb and was created. It was just, yeah, like a peace that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I knew him and his spirit. I knew it was one from the beginning, and he brought so much peace with him.
It's so beautiful. That I am just thinking about how intense it must have been to have a really holy and redemptive, but also heartbreaking loss at home. And then you've barely begun to integrate that experience. And then there's another baby. That's a complicated emotional landscape. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was rich for sure.
Yeah,
And
it sounds like
obviously
it.
it needed to be
Yeah.
that way for everything that was to unfold.
I love that the overwhelming feeling, though, above all those other complicated emotions was that peace that he brought in with him. And I love that. So, yeah, tell me more about your pregnancy with this baby.
It was wild. I think I found your podcast at the beginning of that pregnancy, and just like the phrase "the holy wild" was such a theme for me, and was such like this beautiful anchor. Spoiler alert: his middle name is Wild for that reason, because he brought us into the wild. That's for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of like that big overwhelming piece I spoke to, and then there's a lot of fear, like way more fear than I had in my other pregnancies. Really normal fear, like obviously fear of losing baby, or fear of something going wrong in birth and losing baby in that way, and then just fear of the intensity of birth. My first two births were beautiful in that they were home births. My first was with a midwife, and my second was a free birth. But they were so intense, and maybe they needed to be, to forge me into the mother they needed me to be.
Yeah.
Intense, physically intense, to the point that they were like kind of traumatic. And I didn't want to do that again. I knew I could, and I knew I would. But the very human part of me just wanted to be saved from it all. It was this feeling I had. And that came with a lot of shame, because like something that was unveiled to me in the like free birth, unassisted birth world especially, is feeling of like everything being on your shoulders, and that like desire for help outside of yourself is like not sovereign enough, and not like wild woman
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
And for me, being, I mean, I won't say secular, because I've always been very spiritual, but I've always been really deep in more like new age spirituality. That's how I was raised. That's all I really knew. So like from that framework, it felt like the responsibility of everything on my shoulders, that like radical responsibility concept felt crushing and lonely, in a way that it hadn't with my previous births. So yeah, I had a lot of shame from being like wanting to be saved from these places of very, very real human mother fear. Yeah, it was so big. And I had also had this theme of I'd supported a lot of women in the 2 years prior who had lost babies before birth, in birth, after birth. So it was kind of this, this really tender theme of these beautiful lost mamas that God had brought into my path, that also brought a lot of extra tenderness as well. So yeah, a lot of joy, a lot of peace, a lot of longing for this baby, and also just like so much fear to really bring me into surrender in a new way, which, like I said, it had to be that way for what was going to unfold. But yeah, it was really interesting to hold as a midwife and somebody who walks women through this. There wasn't any access, at least in person, for somebody to do that for me. I know I could have reached out to many beautiful women I know online, but there's no licensed or traditional midwives in our area. It's
At all.
at all.
Wow.
At all. Yeah. So I could feel that desire of like wanting to be held in the way that I have held women, and it just not really being an option. You know, the only option of care was in the hospital, an hour away from our home. And yeah, I was brought to that thought many times in my pregnancy of like, am I really going to do this? There is another option. And each time being like, no, like I know that this is the safe place for us. And like, I know I have a choice, but even if it doesn't make sense, I just knew that this was our journey and that we'd be well despite all the fears. Because it's always hard to tease out like what is intuition versus what is just really real fear that's coming up to be shed and surrendered to.
100%. That's really tricky. Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like your emotions and your feelings and your questions and your wrestlings were kind of leading you into some spiritual questioning too.
Yeah. And that happened. Yeah, it was really nothing to do with me. I didn't even know there was something else to grasp for. So it didn't even feel like a journey of me seeking. It felt like a journey of me being pursued, which was so beautiful and truly the only way I could have received it. Yeah, when I got pregnant, I started having a lot of dreams and then visions of Jesus. And as somebody who's raised in the New Age and like the community I was a part of, who's like wholly judgmental of Christianity, I had always been wholly judgmental of Christianity without knowing anything about it or like thinking I knew what the teachings were. When I started having these dreams and visions of Jesus, I was so resistant and like angry about it. I honestly would have received like any other religion or like spiritual idea than Christianity. I was just like anyone but Jesus, come on. And so I kept just kind of like ignoring it and brushing it off as like pregnancy fever dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh my goodness. And just his patience and grace with me. He kept like relentlessly pursuing me in such a beautiful way. And it felt like just this energy of him meeting me exactly where I was at and not trying to convince me of anything, but it just felt like his presence coming in and just showing me the peace, like the peace that I felt when he would come to me was so, it just changed me on such a cellular level that I couldn't deny it anymore. I'm like, I have no idea what this is. I know nothing about him, and I don't think there's anything that he or anyone else could have said to me to have me be open to faith in that way. But it was just the feeling like he just showed me.
Wow.
Yeah, in so many like beautiful ways, and he kept it really close to my heart. It was just so big and new and confusing. And I was so resistant to it for so long. I didn't really share it. And then eventually I had a really big moment of like acceptance. Finally, we have a sauna in our backyard that was my oasis in pregnancy. After my toddler went to bed, my hubby was with him. I like would go out there and just pray and be with this baby. And those were the moments when like Jesus started coming in really, really strongly. And showing me his love really was the only thing that could have persuaded me at that time, I guess. And there was like this final moment on my knees there, just like surrendering to that last bit of resistance of like, this is the last thing I want to believe in. And him, yeah, it was just, I mean, it's so hard to put into words, but that was the moment where I was just like, okay, it's me and you. Yeah, that was a moment where I really just laid down my life at his feet, even though I had no idea what that looked like, or yeah, I'd had no role models of that. I had no idea what that would look like, but we did that together. And I remember coming back inside later and talking to my husband, who he has a bit of a different journey. He was raised in the church, but had strayed pretty far away from that faith. And I think he had a lot of those beliefs in the background, but they were very much so in the background. And, we were quite content in our life thinking that we were, more elevated than Christianity. But I came to him and was like, I think this baby is a Christian.
That's how you brought it up with him?
It's the only way I knew how to express what was going on, because it was just so outside of myself.
Yeah.
And it felt so entwined with the bringing of this baby onto this earth. It felt like it was him leading me onto this path. Yeah, it unfolded so sweetly. My husband was less surprised than I was. And was just so supportive and right on board from the very beginning, which I know was so led by him, because he's just like, okay, let's do this.
That's amazing. Because were you a little nervous to tell him what was going on with you?
Yeah.
Is he going to get this?
For sure.
I mean, the Lord had gone ahead of you and prepared your husband to welcome that easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been like that since then. I remember this really funny moment. It had been years before. I don't really know what led me to ask him, but I asked it quite jokingly to my husband, what would you do if I became a really devout born again Christian, kind of in the lens of it's the last thing that would ever happen. And he was like, I would always support you, but I'm not going to go to church with you. And I was like, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And then years later, he's like, cool. When are we going to church?
Amazing.
It was just this beautiful, easeful unfolding. And that obviously God was working in more than just baby in his life. Since then, it's just been so apparent how much he's worked in our entire home, in our children, and in our marriage so deeply. So yeah, in that way, it just unfolded in so much ease.
So beautiful and so like Jesus. Just to come meet you exactly where you were, and in a way that you could hear him and receive him, to find a way past your defenses and to lead with love like that, and then to pave the way for you to be able to say yes to him along with your whole family, and to save your whole household, not just you.
Yeah.
I do have some tears in my eyes over this story.
It's so good.
Yeah, he's so good. I'm just so struck with how he found his way to your heart without you looking for him. And I mean, the truth is there's honestly
not even not looking for him, but straight
rejecting.
up running from him.
Right. And I have to be honest, I feel like there's a lot of really poor representations of Christ in our culture and society right now that make it very understandable why someone would run from that. So yeah. That he just came to you with his whole being and just let you experience his presence that transcended any sorts of maybe bad examples or cultural misrepresentations, and he just gave you himself. I'm just so struck by the profundity of that.
Yeah, and it just, like you said, just healed me on a cellular level before even picking up a Bible for the first time in my life, or stepping foot in a church, or before knowing anything. Just the feeling and the love that he gave me, completely rebirthed my heart and our home. And one of the first things I remember him saying to me while I was in this back and forth battle was, who told you couldn't be saved? That feeling of having the whole world on your shoulders, in the world of sovereignty and radical responsibility, and kind of how I had received that teaching as somebody who wasn't walking with my creator. like, who told you you had to do this all on your own? And it was just this feeling of like realizing why I had that desire to be saved and to have some of this responsibility taken off my shoulders, and like the total eradication of the shame around that, of like, it's not because I'm not wild woman enough or sovereign enough, it's because I am not meant to carry this without God. We are designed to need Him to hold us and to save us through childbearing. And yeah, it's just so healing for all the moments I felt birthing two babies, and how scary and out of control it felt at times, and just feeling into that woman and how much she needed to be held by Him in those moments. And yeah, just the overwhelming peace that made absolutely no sense. And it hasn't left since that moment of just like laying down my life at His feet. It's just been this unceasing, overwhelming peace I had never felt before. That just it makes no sense. Every bump in the road is just filled with this overwhelming peace and love that I had no idea I was missing.
Glory to God. It's beautiful. Can I ask about how far into your pregnancy were you when your surrender moment and the sauna occurred?
That was late. I would say like maybe end of second trimester, beginning of third trimester. Yeah, so it took me a long time of wrestling with it, because it was like shortly after my loss, and in the beginning of the first trimester, when I started having those dreams and visions. So I wrestled with it for most of my pregnancy, and then it was my third trimester really that was this total new beginning of exploring like what would it even look like to invite Jesus into this birth. And that was when I started listening to in Lauren's podcast a lot more, and hearing the medicine of other mothers' words who have walked this with Christ as midwife, which was a really big theme for me as well. Like having that longing in the beginning of my pregnancy for being held by a midwife, and it not being available to me, and like a wise woman in my community. So that concept of like Christ as midwife was really, really huge for me, especially in that third trimester. I had a really physically challenging third trimester. By the end of it, I could like pretty much not walk. I always have super excess relaxin in my system and very, very big babies. And so my hips gave out towards the end of that pregnancy, and can just see now, like every moment, how much it brought me to surrender. And like it kept me home with my babies, but kind of away from being out in the world and with past community, which feels like a really beautiful way that He was just protecting me and bringing me into quietness and prayer in a way that really, really needed to happen before I was ready to birth. But yeah, certainly brought me to my knees. I had about a week there at the end of pregnancy where I literally couldn't walk and was just in bed reading the Bible for the first time in my life and praying like unceasingly. My husband had to obviously take off work to take care of our two older ones, and yeah, even though there's so much physical pain at that time, like I'm just so grateful for the ways I was met and brought to my knees and brought into that place of the holy wild, because yeah, it really, really anchored and nourished me as I was preparing for birth.
You were literally a captive audience to the scriptures at the end there.
Oh my God, yeah, it was a lifeline, and had a lot of moments where, as I think you do in wild pregnancies, came to points of symptoms that were concerning, and was like, do I want to go in and get this checked out? Which I have truly nothing against, but like only if it is true and if it's in service to my baby and our health. And so yeah, coming up to some things that felt uncomfortable for me as a birth worker. Like I had some preeclampsia symptoms and like pitting edema, like the kind of preeclampsia swelling and I had had gestational diabetes with my previous baby, and so had some of those symptoms coming up, and just kept coming with each one to the point of like, is it time to go in and get some support, or is it time to just anchor in and nourish my body and rest and pray? And every single time it was Christ as my midwife saying, it's okay, it's fine, I have a plan for you. There's never a need for outsourcing any support. And like I said, I have nothing against that. If at any point I got the nudge that it was time for that, I would have gone in, like getting the ultrasound in the previous pregnancy. But yeah, he was just so clear with me each and every time that it was unfolding perfectly. And so we did. At the end of pregnancy came, and baby just wasn't engaging. He was so high up in my pelvis, and I thought it was so bizarre because my last pregnancies, I just felt like there was a bowling ball between my hips the last weeks, and it wasn't like that at all. He was so high up, even though he was so big, like he didn't have any room in there, but somehow still he was so high up. And I'm really used to belly mapping, so I could feel his head. I could feel him head down. I could feel his head towards my pelvis, but it was really, really high, not engaged at all. And I didn't feel any like cervical pressure like I usually did. And so that threw me for a huge loop. But yeah, I just kept coming back to that doesn't really tell us anything as midwives, right? Because I remember my previous son, he was so low in my pelvis. I felt so much cervical pressure for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it didn't mean birth was imminent, right? So just because this baby wasn't engaged doesn't mean that birth wasn't imminent. Like we don't know anything. But yeah, I remember going to the chiropractor in that last week. I was probably 41 weeks at that point, and she felt his head, belly mapping as well, low down, but not engaged. And she thought I was very curious at 41 weeks. And I went home and started having what turned out to be prodromal labor. I woke up thinking it was labor, and contractions were really steady, 5 minutes apart for 24 hours, but didn't progress into anything. And that happened 3 days in a row. My husband is a train conductor, so he when he's on the train, he can't really come home until he's off it. So he had that stress of does he go into work today and be unreachable for 12 hours or does he not? Yeah, and that was a big, big, big stress. And then we just came to a point of I had read a passage in the Bible. I don't remember what one, but it was just about the promise of the provisions of God, and that we will have all of our basic needs met. And that was the first time I had heard anything like that. And so I said, okay, we're just gonna keep my husband home. We couldn't afford it because he wouldn't get his parental leave insurance until baby was born. So I'm if he's off work for another week or two without being paid, we can't really afford it. And so that was our hesitation. But I said, you know what? It's gonna let me finally relax to just have him home and just trust that we're going to be taken care of. And of course we were. So that was a big surrender moment as well of not trying to wish birth to start, which is so hard in that plus 40 weeks.
When you're in that much
Vaginal
pain.
labor space. Exactly. And so we just said, we're not gonna wish for birth to come. Our only goals every day is to have family time with my husband home and go for a walk and eat good food, and birth will come when it comes and we'll be taken care of.
I love that list of late pregnancy goals.
Yeah, the to-do list.
That's a really good list.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was such a sweet time. And now looking back, I'm just so grateful for those last few days, because every day we'd work, we'd chew on that to-do list. We'd go to the lake and bring a picnic, and I would wobble around kind of trying to go for a walk in so much pain. And then we just during this, and it was also December, where there would usually be a lot of snow, and there wasn't, which was beautiful for actually being able to go for walks and maneuver and have a lot of outside time. And then one day we woke up and the same thing happened. I was distraught about not being in labor again, so we packed up a picnic and we went to the lake and we had the most beautiful day. I brought I couldn't walk at that point. So I bought a lounger and just laid in the lounger in the sun. It was the sunniest day, even though again, it was December. This was so sunny and warm, and I was knitting a baby blanket in that lounger while my husband and the kids went for a walk around the lake. And yeah, I was just surrendering so much at that point. I wasn't having prodromal labor that day, so I knew it wasn't going to happen soon. Baby is still not engaged. It's super high up in my pelvis, but I felt baby moving a lot that day. Looking back that day, I couldn't belly map. I couldn't find his head, but I knew he wasn't engaged because I didn't feel any pressure. He didn't really make any meaning of it in my head. I was just he's finding his perfect birth position, and it still felt really far off. So then we came home and I was putting the kids to bed and reading them books, and it was around 7 o'clock. I started having contractions again, and they felt the same as prodromal labor. So it's okay, we're just gonna go through the cycle again, and I'm gonna go to sleep and they're gonna stop. But I read their books and put them to bed and started coming on more and more gently, and I didn't dare say anything and jinx it. So I just went and had a bath, and I was that will slow things down, and then I can go get some sleep, because I had been up the whole night prior, just tossing and turning and uncomfortable. And so I was I wasn't even available for labor to start at that time. I was I need to sleep before my body can do this. But I got in the bath and they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So it was around 9:30 in the bath. I called over to my husband and was you should go to sleep. And he was why? It's only 9:30. And I was no, I think the baby's coming tonight and I'm going to need you. You need to go to sleep. So he did. And I was just in the dark in the bath for a long time as all the beautiful birth hormones came up, and when things started getting a lot bigger and I was okay, we're past the point of return. I got out of the bath and I hit this big wall of fear. It was this just overwhelming dread of being okay, this is a final moment where I decide am I doing this or not? And I remember coming downstairs in the dark and just praying so much, and God showing me you have another option right now. The kids are asleep. You could call Nana to come be with the kids, and you and your husband could go to the hospital and make a different choice. That's so available to you. And yeah, it was kind of that last moment of God being do you want to do this? And in that moment I just was no, there's no part of me that wants that or thinks that would be what's best for this particular birth or baby. And so again, it was that final surrender of being okay, Christ, you're the midwife. You've shown me there's another option. I have informed consent in this situation, and let's do this. And so at that point, all the fear completely melted away into just the most beautiful bliss. I my contractions started coming in a lot more intensely, but they weren't like anything I'd experienced before with my prior births. They were pleasurable. Yeah, I just felt so protected, and so safe. I think in my last birth, I had a lot of fear and a lot of feeling out of control. And this time I was just listening to worship music blasting in my earphones, because man, everybody was asleep in our little cabin. And it was, yeah, just the most beautiful, euphoric, prayer-filled space of just me and baby and Jesus swaying in the dark with music, and every contraction coming, I just prayed for it to be eased into pleasure and gentleness, and it was every
Amazing.
every single time. Whenever any tension came up in my body and that started feeling like pain, it would just melt away as I was praying and anchoring into worship music. And I went like that for hours. It was so beautiful just to be alone in the dark, and it was so easeful and gentle and pleasurable, which is just what I was praying for. It's just an easefulness I didn't even think was possible.
Wow.
in birth, and I was just kind of blown away by actually receiving it. And I remember this moment of I was so tired, so I was like, I'm just gonna go like drift in and out of sleep between contractions in the bed. And I laid down by my husband, and he kind of like half woke up and was like, "Are you having a baby?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's happening." Yeah, and it was just so peaceful and easy that I thought I was in very, very early labor. And I remember getting out of bed and just keeping my voice really low and quiet to not wake anyone up, just gentle hums. And I lit a candle and was swaying in the birth ball and singing along to my worship music. It was so beautiful. And then eventually I decided to feel my cervix and get an idea of where we're at. And I was so dilated and my bags were bulging through, and I was absolutely blown away. I was just like giddy with excitement in that time. I'm like, I cannot believe I've made so much progress in just like this blissful, euphoric ease by myself.
Amazing.
I was just, yeah, beside myself with excitement. Oh, and then my daughter woke up at that time and she came out of her bedroom as I was like moaning. She said, "What's all this noise about?" And I said, "I'm having a baby." And she was like, "Right now? Like tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah, tonight, but like not soon. So go back to sleep and I'll wake you up when it's time." And she's like, "Okay."
That's so cute.
So cute. And she was so excited. Yeah, I decided to get into the shower at that point. The shower and the sauna were like my prayer space in motherhood, those little moments that we get without a baby or a
Yes.
toddler on us. And so getting back into the shower was so beautiful, and that like my body just really, really knew how to pray there. Yeah, it was so beautiful and just so easy. I was just in disbelief the whole time, and if my waters broke in the shower, and I could see there was a lot of meconium, which didn't shake me in the moment, and that probably like half of the births I've attended to have had meconium in the water, and that
Yeah.
felt really normal for me. But I also knew that when my water breaks in labor, it means it's go time, and things are about to get really, really intense. So I woke my husband up, and that was about 3:30 in the morning. I woke him up and I said, "It's probably time to call Nana, my mom, because the plan was for her to come and be with the kids in case I really needed my husband," which I really did in my past birth. So, and we're an hour drive away, and it was a snowstorm, which
Oh,
I had no idea at the time. I was laboring, but it was the first snowstorm of the year. So of course my husband like tucks away and calls her, and she's like, "Okay, it's the middle of the night and it's a snowstorm, but I'll do my best."
yikes.
He didn't tell me that at that time, but he was like, "Okay, Nana's on her way." And my 2-year-old woke up because my husband got out of bed, and he co-sleeps with us, but only when we're touching. So we knew it was go time. Things were getting more intense, and I really needed my husband's hands on me without a toddler right there. So we brought a toddler into our big girls' room, and they read books together, and they were so, I heard them like giggling in the other room, and it was so sweet, and they were just happy to have their space in the middle of the night reading books, having a little sleepover party that they never get to have.
That's
And that
lovely.
was really it was really, really sweet until Nana ended up coming maybe about 20 minutes before baby came out. Yeah, I came out of the shower and my husband was holding me through contractions, and it's still like it was so intense, but it still felt really gentle, and it still felt really pleasurable even. And then more and more fresh meconium was coming out, and that was something where my midwife brain came back online and was like, I don't love to see that, because it wasn't just meconium in the water, but it was like fresh meconium actively coming out, and a lot. And so like my limbic midwife brain came
Mhm.
back online and was like trying to make sense of the situation. And then that's when the pain and intensity came in, because I wasn't anchored on my prayer and my trust. But as soon as that part of my brain came back online, it was trying to analyze the situation. Then, of course, everything melted. Oh, the beautiful pleasure melted away. And I was like, this is intense and I don't know what's going on and I hate it. But again, another moment to just be brought to my knees. In my rational brain, I knew I've only seen this much meconium with a breech birth. This much meconium, fresh meconium, would only make sense with a breech birth. I had that thought, and yet I was like, no, I felt baby's head down. This is not a breech birth. Which is so, yeah, it's so, I can look back and see how much God was protecting me from knowing.
Yeah.
Like I've never missed a breech presentation in a client with belly mapping or in these signs like meconium. Like my rational brain should have known, and I can just see how much I was protected from it, because it would have brought some extra layers of fear or just preparation in general, like being an hour away from a hospital and doing it solo. Rationally, I would have wanted some more support for sure. And I had been on a long journey of supporting a mama who had lost her baby in a breech birth. So there's some like personal levels that would have been really, really hard for me to surrender to had I known. And so I can look back and laugh now at all the places where, like, logically, I absolutely knew it was breech, and like there was still no part of me that accepted it. I was like, no, that doesn't make any sense.
Even when there's fresh meconium coming out of you, you're still like,
Exactly.
no,
No,
couldn't be.
So funny. So yeah, I was trying to make sense of it, and I remember asking my husband to turn my music up, because like that worship music was just my anchor to ease and protection and pleasure. And so he turned it up, and I was trying to get back into that space of surrendery goodness. And I remember getting really annoyed whenever a non-worship song came on, because then the pain would start to come back, and I would be like, change the song. It's like, absolutely, you got it. So we moved that way for a long time, and meconium just kept streaming out. And so I was like, call my sweet friend who's at my last birth, who is a doula. I said, call her, get her on the phone. And I can't even remember exactly what we said on the phone, because I was at that point of transition of contractions being back to back. I'm sure I didn't say anything logically, but I got on the phone and was like, there's so much meconium. And I feel like I started to bear down at that point. I felt like I was pushing against something. Like, baby is not budging, meconium streaming out. I don't know what's going on. And yeah, she just held me in such a sweet way. Just like hearing me and hearing my fear, and also just like really trusting me in the process. And I remember being in the middle of these intense contractions and hearing my husband on the phone with her afterwards, because I couldn't talk, and her being like, what's your intuitive sense, Jessie? Like, do you think things are fine, or do you think you need to go get some support? And yeah, he was just so steadfast, and obviously God was speaking through him. He was like, no, we're fine. We're about to have a baby. We're not going anywhere. She's fine. And I remember in transition, like shouting back, no, we're not having a baby. It's not fine. And she's like, okay, I'm just going to hang up the phone now, and you keep me updated if you want. Because she knew I was about to push out a baby. And I was like, no, I said what most women say in transition. I said, I can't do this. But it wasn't that I can't do birth, or like I can't do the pain, because even at that point, like, it wasn't painful. It just felt wrong, in the sense that I felt like baby wasn't moving, and I was pushing against something. And like that, whatever this is, whatever is going on right now, I can't do this. And then I remember just like crying out to God in that moment. I'm just being like, I need help. I need help. I need help. I need help. And then I felt baby move, like start descending into my pelvis. And at that moment, I was like, okay, baby's coming. Because like I said, I can't do this, which was like baby being stuck, baby not coming. But as soon as I started feeling him descending in my pelvis, I was like, oh my God, okay, we're having a baby, and this is the best ever. And all the fear and the tension and the pain melted away in that moment. And I just asked my husband to come and put his hands on me and talk to me. And I was just anchoring into him and my love for him and God being so close. Like he sent this overwhelming peace again that just washed over me, and I could feel baby descending in my pelvis, and it was the most like radically beautiful, pleasurable feeling. But it felt different. It felt like squishy. Like it felt like something squishy was descending into my pelvis. It did not feel like it had my previous baby. He'd had a huge head, and I had also had a shoulder dystocia that I managed at home, and it ended up being fine. But like it was a very different bodily sensation of like bone on bone. And this felt like the most easeful, gentle, squishy thing coming. And at that point, I was like, okay, the baby's breech. I don't even know if I said that logically in my head, but at that point I turned to my husband very calmly and was like, okay, if a butt comes out first, don't catch him. Like, be hands off. Just let the baby come out. Because I hadn't prepared him for breech birth at all because I wasn't having a breech baby.
Right.
So I just said, if a butt comes out first, hands off. Don't catch him. My husband was just like, okay. And then I could feel him start to crown or rump, as I know now. And I was like, what do you see? And my husband was like, I see is something, but like knowing it was definitely not a head, but baby was a complete breech. So it was like his bum and his foot coming out at the same time, and his knees were kind of like tucked up towards his chin. And so he was seeing this like one bum cheek and a bit of foot. And so he was like, I have no idea what this is. Like, is this
I don't know what I'm
lips?
looking at.
I don't know. Something is coming out. And I was like, okay, that's definitely breech. And then pushed, and I looked between my legs, and I just saw this bum and legs dangling out of me. And then my contractions stopped. Very normal. But my husband was like, keep pushing, keep pushing. And my midwife brain just like snapped at him and was like, don't tell me to push. Like, you know this. I have trained you to not tell me to push. But then when I said that, I could feel like, oh no, that was actually God speaking through him, because then I heard God's voice of being like, no, it's time to push. It's time to get baby out. Even if you don't have a contraction, like, it's time to get him out safely.
Yeah.
So I felt that, and yeah, I pushed despite not having the contraction as hard as I could, and out he came. Like I said, Nana had arrived about 15 minutes before he was born, and she had kind of just snuck in and gone into the kids' bedroom. So it was just my husband and I at that point, and yeah, baby came out, and I picked him up and was so shocked. It was a boy. We had both been like really, really sure that it was a girl. So shocked it was a boy. We're just like rubbing him and talking to him and calling him into his body, and he did amazing. Yeah, he didn't need any help at all. He was crying right away. And as soon as he was just like vital and had beautiful tone and was crying, I called out, get my other baby. And so we called in my mom and our other two kids. This was just like a moment or two after he was born, and they came in, and I was just in such shock. We were all like, nobody even said anything. We were all just like giggling. It was 5 a.m. when he came out, so it was like the sun was just starting to come up, and we were all just, it was candlelit and dark, and we were all just like hysterically giggling at the absolute awe and wonder of what had just happened. And it was this baby, and he came breech, and it was so radically easy and holy and pleasurable, and he's here and he's well, and oh my God, I can't believe we just did this.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so special.
That's so good.
So good. Yeah.
I think it's hysterical and awesome how the Lord kind of like kept blinders over your eyes about
It
the
is.
breech thing until the very, very end when there was no turning back. And then just like coached you through that, first through your husband's voice and then through the Spirit's voice inside of you. Like, yeah, now it's time to push. And then he didn't need any help transitioning, huh? Like he was just,
No,
it's beautiful.
no, it was really, really, really easeful. He pinked up and was crying right away, and yeah, I was just overwhelmed with the grace of God, and yeah, that he gifted us that moment, and it could just be so easy.
Wow.
And he was a big baby. He was over 10 pounds.
Oh, he was. Another big
Yeah.
one. Yep. So an over 10-pound breech babe.
Yeah.
Amazing. My goodness.
Absolutely.
Wow. And so you didn't have any help from contractions for the last, like pushing out his head? You just did that with...
Yeah, his arms and his head was without a contraction.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Good work.
Yeah, and it was easy. It was literally one push, and he was out.
So good. I just love to hear a smooth, uncomplicated breech home birth story any day of the week.
Yeah, I really needed it as well.
I'm sure. I bet that was healing for you because, like you said, you had been through some experiences with women you've served that had different outcomes that were really painful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really, really, really healing for me as a birth worker as well as a mother. I know, like after my first two births, of course, there was that feeling of triumph and meeting your baby for the first time. And also, like, I received those babies in shell shock of just the intensity. Like, my first, I tore really severely, and there's a midwife there that really got in between our first meeting each other, like her catching the baby. And then my second was a free birth, and like my husband caught him and we received the baby on our own. But like I had just been really scared and resolving shoulder dystocia, and it was so just radically painful that I was kind of shell-shocked in both situations. So to receive this baby in so much presence and prayer and pleasure and ease was, yeah, just such an epic gift from God.
Truly. On so many levels.
On so many levels, yeah. And it was just so radically, inexplicably good that I couldn't take credit for any of it.
Yeah.
Which was almost better, of just being like, this was so not me and my preparedness or like anything I did to, birth this baby well. This was the most like gracious gift from God. Like just the way that was, yeah, it was just such a brilliant rebirth and reorientation and humbling in the most radically beautiful way, right?
I think that's another sharp contrast to the kind of like more new age free birth movement. It's like almost this, it's your goddess-like status almost, where you're like having reached a certain state of
Enlightenment.
Yeah, that like, and then anything good that happens in the birth is because of that, and anything that goes wrong in the birth is because you didn't do it well enough. And what you're experiencing here was like truly just a gift of grace to you from the Lord that you knew was supernatural. That it didn't come from your effort or lack thereof.
No, it didn't come from anything I did. That was another thing, is like I felt like the least physically prepared for birth. Like I said, I could hardly walk by the end of it. So like I wasn't strong in my body. I had really struggled to nourish because I was also breastfeeding my toddler and, in bed a lot of the time in pain. So like, and I had all these fears where like fear is really demonized in the birth world, of like fear causes complications and interventions and like causes your birth to go awry, or like it means you're just not trusting enough. And for me, like the fear was just so holy. Like it was the invitation from God to lay it all down and let him in. Like I would have had no reason to surrender to him without the fear. Yeah, so just so humbling to my midwife brain of like I wasn't doing any of the stretches and the exercises and the fear work, and or like the shadow work they call it, and was given this supernatural, beautiful birth through grace and no works of my own. Was like a really beautiful symbolic moment for me and for our whole family.
Truly so symbolic. That's really rich. Wow. Yeah. That's a beautiful insight you just shared. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and then like so many people afterwards like sharing that we had a breech birth at home and all was well, the reaction you receive is like, oh my God, you did it. And with my last birth, I could receive that and be like, yes, I did that. But this time, like when I received that, like I couldn't receive that. I was just like, no, what did I do? I didn't do it. It was truly just like this moment of like learning what it means to give the glory and the praise to God in like a really cellular, experiential way that like I maybe wouldn't have been able to find fresh in my faith without this without this journey. Just every single layer, right, turns back to like it needed to happen this way for our family to be able to be reborn through Christ. It needed to happen exactly like this.
That's incredible. Like he shared the gospel with you again in a like nonverbal way. Like
Yeah.
through the embodied experience of this birth. Like
Yeah, somatically.
yeah. Wow. Wow. I'm going to be thinking about this for a little bit today, Gemma. This is so good. And he's so good.
So good.
To just know exactly how to disciple you and show you the way of Jesus. Like, it's really, really rich. Okay, well, couple more birth nerd questions. How did your placenta birth go, and how was your postpartum? Which you're still in.
Totally. Yeah, 4 months in. The placenta came shortly after that. It was definitely like less than an hour, probably around the half an hour mark. I had really, really intense afterbirth contractions. So, gets more intense every time. But yeah, I pushed placenta out with ease, which was beautiful. I definitely had complications with that with my second, which was also a really interesting birth nerdy story because my placenta had come out at a normal time, but I had a retained lobe, which I didn't know because I had checked my placenta and there was not a missing lobe. So I was like, this is a whole placenta, and all of the amniotic sac was even accounted for. And then afterwards, like my cervix just wouldn't close. My uterus just wasn't really shrinking back down. Like even hormonally, like the birth still felt open. I still felt really, really out of it. I couldn't figure out like why is this not feeling complete? And then it was a week later that a separate lobe came out.
Whoa.
And I had this dream of all of these tiny placentas, and then I woke up and a tiny lobe came out of me, and it looked like a small placenta. It had a vein coming out of the middle of it, like an umbilical cord. And I realized that I had a completely separate lobe.
What's the word for that again? I'm trying to remember the name for that kind of placenta.
I can see the word.
Find it. I can't find it in my brain.
It's like subchondriate. Yeah. I know the word. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a separate lobe where it's connected with from a vessel to the placenta, and that is why it wasn't accounted for. It's like the separate lobe that was still attached. So that for me as a birth nerd was very, very fascinating.
Totally.
And really changed the landscape of our initial first week postpartum. But this time it all came out and it was the biggest placenta I'd ever seen. And I encapsulate placentas, so I have seen hundreds. It was massive.
Wow.
And the cord was so short, so thick and so short, which was crazy to me. And it just made so much sense in why baby flipped at the end.
Uh-huh.
Because he was definitely head down. And I kept praying and praying for him to get in the right position for birth, thinking I was praying for him to engage, get into my pelvis. But at that moment, like very last minute, he flipped, which as a 10-pound baby at 41 weeks pregnant, is not an easy feat.
No.
I remember him moving around so much.
Yep.
And like I could see afterwards, it was because his cord was so short, and like God knew that it needed to be this way for him to come safely. And so yeah, as soon as I saw how short that cord was and kind of guessing and where my placenta was located in my uterus, I was like, okay, that's why. He's like, if it's gonna happen, it's going to happen this way. And you
Yes, he
can't know
needed to
about
put
it
the
because you're
least.
going to get in the way.
Yep. So he needed to put the least amount of space between him and his placenta so that the cord had enough
That's
leeway
my
to
guess.
let him out.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible? That's just
Incredible.
so incredible. Like the body's wisdom from God to know how to work a thing like that out, even though
Yeah.
most people would say it's not good that the baby's breached, but in this case perhaps was really important.
Really important. Yeah. And that was the message I got over and over again of like just how finally planned this was. And like my fear was like something is wrong with me physiologically in that he can't engage in my pelvis. Like something is in the way. Yeah, and that beautiful, like gentle nudge and provision of like, no, this is actually so on purpose.
And protective.
Yeah.
And the fact that you said there was a point where you cried out to God and then you felt him drop into your pelvis for the first time. Was the distance of time between that drop and his emergence pretty short?
Really short. Yeah. Yeah. From transition on the phone to him being out was under 10 minutes.
Again, probably on purpose. Like that
Yeah.
needed to be.
And then my friend called back because she wanted to check in. Like she knew, obviously, as a birth worker, that baby was about to come. It was transition. But she called back like 10 minutes later, baby had already been out. And she's like, okay, how's she doing? And Jessie was like, baby's out. And she's like, okay, why are you on the phone with me?
Well, because you called.
But it was such a, like, it was in that moment of us being in this giddy, giggling bliss of him being like, the baby's already here. And her being like,
so good.
And he was breached. And he's a boy.
That must have been a fun conversation with her.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. So many surprises.
Yeah, it was so, so special. And then, yeah, placenta came out and we were just home. It was in the early morning and my mom was there to bring the kids downstairs and make them pancakes while I was up in bed and nursing. And just like in this beautiful awe with my husband of what we had just experienced. Yeah, I've had some people ask my husband about like his new faith more recently, and something he said multiple times is like, you know, when you see a baby be born through your wife, it's really, really hard to not see God.
Amen.
And so I think that was a really big turning point for him as well.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah,
Gosh.
and he stayed so close in the like early postpartum time. You know, not that he's not now, but like in the when the veil is so thin, the end of pregnancy and then birth and then in the beginning of postpartum. Yeah, it was such a beautiful time of our family being home, and he was well and nursed really well, and we were just kind of undisturbed at home, and it ended up being like a really private, quiet initial postpartum, which was layered. Like my last babies, we had a lot of community coming over and bringing food and supporting us and wanting to hear the birth story, and that felt really nourishing at the time. Kind of had a little bit of like grief and heartbreak and feeling more alone in this postpartum because like people who were my community who I'd really expected to kind of be at the feet of my postpartum bed and show up didn't. They just kind of dropped off the face of the planet. We didn't really hear from them, and it was like confusing and heartbreaking. And looking back on it, like I can just see how maybe our space needed to be protected. In the tenderness of, you know, new mama and also being reborn through our faith. And maybe we just needed some protection to really anchor into him and each other in a really new way that like I can see how that was beautifully led as well. And also kind of that aching of like yearning for people and community and support and like the bigness of the grief of that and missing that really led us to seeking out community that was now aligned and like people who are really going to join us in this walk with Christ in a new way. So it was like, I think I needed to be kind of grieving and seeking in a way in that postpartum to seek out, the people who are going to, like I said, walk with us in that really good way. I can look back on it and be really, really grateful for what a like sacred, protected bubble that was, and all of the quiet time I had to just read the Bible and pray for really healthy, Christ-like community and friends to come into our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
I hear the grief and the recognition of God's wisdom there too. That's the both and of that. Because I'm guessing this community that showed up for you last time doesn't know Christ. And so perhaps they wouldn't have known how to even occupy this new space that your family finds yourselves in. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But still to feel that sadness over the shift in friendships and community is really real and valid.
Yeah, I think just like on a physiological level, our body is like looking around us postpartum, being like, who are my people? Like, who's going to keep this baby and I safe while we're so tender and vulnerable? And there was a big, like I said, yearning and seeking for community. And also when I looked around me in that moment, like it was my children and it was my husband, and like most of all, it was Jesus. And so that really gave an opportunity to like anchor into me somatically as, my whole body kind of knit back together. And I can see, just the immense gift of that as well.
Another opportunity to see the sufficiency of Christ. Yeah. Wow. Well, sister, I can't thank you enough for the gift of your story here. You said that other people's stories on this podcast had been a sort of medicine for you.
Absolutely.
And I am 100% confident that yours will be medicine for others too. So it's really neat that you got to kind of pay that forward, I guess. And so thank you for being willing to do that and to get up so early to talk to me about it.
Oh, it's such a gift. Yeah, such a gift for me too. And such a beautiful, like you said, full circle moment of, this story definitely wanted to be shared here first.
So honored by that. So blown away by his goodness.
Yeah.
Is there, if our listeners want to find you, is there any place where they might do that?
Yeah, my Instagram is wildbirth with a Y, so WYLDBIRTH. You can maybe find me there. I'm on a break from social media for Lent at least, and I've archived all of my posts because I'm learning how to step back into my service to women and birth through Christ.
Yeah, it's a reorientation for your ministry and birth work too, I'm sure.
Totally. Yeah. So I've been totally offline for Lent to just really focus on prayer and kind of what that looks like and what he's calling for me, and stepping back into birth world and sharing. So I'm sure I'll be back on there shortly and weaving my work in a really new way.
Yeah, that's exciting. I feel like we could probably do a whole episode about that too, about what it looks like to do that work as a birth servant, to, on the other side of having encountered Jesus. How does that inform the way that you serve now? And what do you have to tune off, and what do you have to add in? And like, that's a...
Yeah, my business, my birth work was really, really enmeshed in that New Age spiritual community. So it needed to all just be kind of cut off at the root for now, and then just watch it bloom and sprout with spring and in a really new way.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does in you around that, and commend you for your willingness to have another layer of surrender and restructuring. And like Lauren and I also talk about, the Lord is also our business manager. He's our great midwife and our business manager. So you get to invite him into that role in your life now too. And it'll be really good.
Yeah, we've been anchoring into church and a really, really nourishing, God-filled community here in person first, and like feeling the fortification, like building our foundation there. And I can feel him calling to me in the ways that I'm going to serve again, like through that foundation of like the in-person space back into the online realms. And this feels like a really beautiful dip into that and sharing some of the medicine of his grace through my story that I can share to the world.
Amen. And I'm so glad you found a local church that is nurturing and nourishing and forming you right now. That's so important. So
Yeah, that was like our first stepping out into the world after the postpartum bubble. Like we reached 40 days and I was like, okay, it's time to start going to church.
And you hadn't been until postpartum to any church building?
No, I really wanted to at the very end of my pregnancy. I like yearned for that. And also we're an hour drive away and I could hardly walk and I had a toddler to take care of.
Yeah.
So like rationally, it didn't really make sense, but it was sweet to have that like that gentle yearning be able to build through my postpartum space and being like, okay, when we reach 40 days, it's time. Like we were so ready and eager at that point to be received in that space and to go from like a really private postpartum to like being received in such a beautiful, stunning way in a church community was really, really healing. People I met one time were now coming over and bringing us food and calling and checking in a way that like my dearest friends for the last decade didn't. And that was also really powerful and just showing God's grace and how he works through people and like teaching us how to love each other. That again was also like him teaching me the gospel without me knowing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And giving you a yearning for the church, which is his bride, and he loves his church. And so that you felt that yearning for that, and then you ran to her and she welcomed you in that way. That does my heart good to hear that. Yeah.
I think it was a book that you recommended on the podcast that was from a couple Orthodox moms for the first 40 days postpartum.
Oh, A Sacred Beginning.
Yeah, I read that postpartum as well, and it was just such a beautiful anchor and draw into what that looks like. Like I had done postpartum work for many, many years, have a postpartum story, physiological postpartum story podcast as well. So I was really acquainted to like that space from a New Age spiritual lens, but to anchor it into Christ in that way was just so nourishing for me. I loved that book.
Me too. So rich. So rich. All right. Well, I don't even know how to wrap this up. I feel like I could talk to you for hours more. But it's truly been a joy to talk with you and to hear your stories. And you really encouraged my faith today. Yeah.
Glory to God. Thank you so much, Brooke.
All right. Well, I guess this is putting you on the spot, and if you don't feel comfortable, I will just edit this out. But would you have any desire to just pray over our listeners real quickly before we hang up? If that feels awkward, we don't have to.
Yeah, I can do that. Father, thank you so much for speaking through me today, showing your love, your peace, provision, and your protection through my testimony and through the birth of this sweet baby and the rebirth of our home and my marriage and my service to birth and work with women. And I pray that the women listening will receive all of this through you, through these words, and you may work through their life and their births and the knitting of these babies together in their wombs in a beautiful, powerful, protective way that you did in ours. All glory to you.
Amen. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.